Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My next topic is commands and prohibitions, awamir wa nawahi. I have earlier mentioned that the language of the Quran is different to a statutory text in the sense that it is not confined to the delivery of commands and prohibitions and their immediate consequences. That is in the Quran also espoused with a moral appeal that may consist of encouragement or warning, allusion to the benefit or the harm of a conduct, sometimes punishment, promise of reward and threat of a punishment. And this makes the Quranic language a little more complex to analyze and to evaluate. The typical form of a command in the linguistic sense is the imperative mood. In Arabic, for example, if'al is to do this, izhab to go. These are the commands, typical linguistic forms of command. But in the Quran we find that a simple past is sometimes used to deliver a command, or sometimes a present participle is used to deliver a command, like kutiba alaykumus siyam, fasting has been prescribed upon you. This delivers a command. Similarly, anyone who observes the moon, then let him fast. وَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. This is, in linguistic terms, it is a present participle, but this is the kind of diversity of language you find in the Quran. Also, the values, the juridical values that are derived from these linguistic forms vary. And sometimes a command may be, or a prohibition may be delivered in entirely different tone of language. For example, a moral condemnation attached to a certain conduct. It is no virtue to approach the houses through the rear. You must enter the house through the front door, the houses of people. لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهَا in Surah 2, verse 185. Sometimes some statement is made and then it is reinforced by the promise of reward or threat of a punishment. Like the verse of inheritance, Surah 4, Ayah 13, explains the allotment of shares. Then say those who observe it, they will merit a reward, and those who do not observe it will be liable to punishment. These are the kind of specifications of the language of the Quran. First, I begin with commands. Commands is a command, or amr is defined as a verbal demand to do something issued from a position of superiority to one who is inferior. This is different from supplication or dua, which is from a position of inferiority to one who is superior, or from request or iltimas, which is between people of equivalent status. A command can give rise to three types of juridical values, and it can establish an obligation, or or something which is merely recommendable, or even that which is only permissible, wajib, mandub, mubah. And then the question arises, what is the primary meaning of a command and what is the secondary? Some have maintained the position that command theoretically is a homonym that partakes in all these values and can establish something permissible, something obligatory, or something recommendable. Others have only maintained that command can convey two meanings, obligation or recommendation. But yet another opinion has it that the lowest value point that a command can deliver is one of permissibility. The Jumhur, that is the majority of ulama, maintain that when a command is not attended by surrounding indications, absolute in the sense of an absolute command, it conveys an obligation or wujub. But if this position may be changed by reference to attending indications. For example, a command may be reduced to a mere permissibility if there are indications that would suggest that. Like in the Quran, Surah 7, verse 31, Kulu washrabu, eat and drink, but do not go into excess. Kulu literally, linguistically, is a command form imperative, but it cannot be. It is mere permissibility, simply because eating and drinking are the necessities of life. It cannot take a command as such, so it is only permissibility. A command may also convey what is recommendable. In Surah 2, verse 282, when you extend a loan to someone, reduce it into writing. إِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى فَاكْتُبُوهُ. So documentation in transaction is recommendable because people forget it may give rise, conflict may arise. It is recommendable. Why we say it is recommendable? The Zahiri school maintain no, it is obligatory. Because the text later follows on to say, if some of you entrust others, then let the trustee deliver his trust. فَإِنْ أَمِنَ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا فَلْيُؤَدِّ الَّذِي اؤْتُمِنَ أَمَانَتَهُ. So here the text reduces the rigor of his earlier provision. If some of you have trust over others, you may, in other words, not document. The same kind of example can be given with regard to witnesses, etc. The Jumhur and some other positions, the Zahiris, have given different interpretations. A command even can imply a threat, like in Surah 41, verse 40, اعملوا ما شئتم, do what you want to do. If you don't listen, this is kind of a threat. Or it can convey humiliation. Taste the torture, O mighty honorable, in a certain part of the Quran. Taste the torture. Zuqu azab al-harib. This is occurring in the linguistic form of command, but of course it's what it conveys is a sense of reprimand. The primary meaning of command, according to the Hanafis, is obligation. In that we maintain, unless there are indications that we depart from that to a different position. What is a command after immediately following a prohibition? What is the value of this if a command follows a prohibition? Here again, the Hanafis maintain that a command is a command whether it's preceded by prohibition or anything else. We still maintain that the primary meaning of command is an obligation. But the position is also, another view is that a command following a prohibition conveys permissibility only. Like in the Quran, when you come out of the state of ihram in the Hajj, then you may hunt. وَإِذَا حَلَّلْتُمْ فَاسْتَوْدُوا. Now, the state of ihram was a prohibition. You were not allowed to go hunting. Once you have come out of this prohibition, فَاسْتَوْدُوا, you may hunt. Does it convey what? It only conveys permissibility. Another question arises whether a command requires a single instance of compliance, or does it require repetition? The majority of ulama maintain that there are no objective answers to this question. We look at the indications and surrounding clues and circumstances. The minimum meaning of a command requires a single instance of compliance. But if a command is espoused with a condition, then each time that condition materializes, the command must be observed. Like وَإِن كُنْتُمْ جُنُبًا فَاتَّطَهَّرُوا, Surah 5, verse 6. If you are impure, then take an ablution. So, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ, if you are. This condition, each time you are impure, then you must take a bathing or ablution. أَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِدُلُوكِ الشَّمْسِ. Perform the salat at the time of the decline of the sun. So each time the time of salat or prayer comes, then the command falls due. Another question arising with regard to the understanding of commands is whether it requires immediate performance or a delayed performance is also acceptable. Once again, the reference is made to surrounding indications, and it is only by reference to other indications we can answer this question. But the commandant or one who issues a command can specify, go to such and such a place now, or go tomorrow. Of course, these are acceptable, and there is no need to analyze about whether it is immediate or late or delayed. But indications, circumstances will tell us. If someone is thirsty and asks someone to give him as his servant water, obviously this is requires immediate compliance, even if there are no such words uttered. Sometimes the flexibility is available with regard to performance. The performance of prayer, 5 prayers, for example, is within a certain segment of time. Within those segments of time, whether 3 hours, 4 hours, more or less, any time is good. At other times, the flexibility is very wide. The performance, for example, of kafarat. Kafarat is that expiations or self-inflicted penalties. If someone breaks his oath, he gives a kafara or an expiation any time during the lifetime of a person. That manner of compliance is acceptable. Another question arises whether the opposite of a command amounts to a prohibition. Now the majority of the schools answer this into the affirmative. Yes, the opposite of a command is a prohibition. Whether it is a single instance of compliance or more than that, but if you ask someone to move, then he is prohibited from standing still or staying still. That is a simple kind of the opposite of a command is a prohibition. But some activities may be more complex or compound. If you ask someone to stand, is he prohibited from a number of other positions like sitting, crouching, lying down? All of these amount to the opposite of that command. Some disagreement arises. Some maintain that only one of these different positions can be the correct opposite of the command. Al-Ghazali, his teacher Al-Juwayni, the Maliki jurist Ibn Hajib, in the Mu'tazila school, maintain the opposite. Say the opposite of a command is not a prohibition, because we don't exactly know what is involved. Some commands are compound and involve a variety of situations. Some Hanafis and Shafis maintain that only one meaning of the opposite of a command can be said to be the correct opposite. And we don't know about the others. And then there is a third view saying that yes, the opposite of a command is a prohibition, and the opposite activity is prohibited, but it only with regard to commands that definitely convey an obligation. We don't know about commands that convey recommendation or permissibility. Then a prohibition or nahya, the definition of this is a prohibition is a word or words which demand the avoidance of something, addressed from a position of superiority to one who is inferior. And again, in the Arabic language, linguistically, it is the negative command, which is the typical form of a prohibition. La taf'al, do not do. This is a typical prohibition. La taqtulun nafsa allati, do not slay a life that God has made sacrosanct. In Surah 6, 1, verse 151. Like a prohibition, other linguistic forms are used in the Quran to deliver, like a command, to deliver a prohibition. Like a simple statement, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ, prohibited to you is the consumption of dead carcass, in Surah 5, verse 3. It's a statement. Sometimes the present participle is used to deliver a prohibition. وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ, and he has prohibited lawlessness and evil. 16, Surah 16, verse 90. Another form of prohibition is in the Quran, the denial of permissibility. فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ مِنْ بَعْدٍ, this is not permissible after. in Surah 2, verse 230. The husband, the wife, this is concerning divorce. If the husband has divorced the wife, he may not marry her again unless there is another intervening marriage. And this is فَلَا تَحِلُّ, denial of prohibition. And this is a denial of permissibility rather. Amounts to, is the manner of the Quranic language that delivers a prohibition. Then again, sometimes the Quran uses words in the form of a command, but actually it conveys prohibitions. Like at the time of Friday prayer, وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ, abandon trading during the Friday prayer time. Abandon is a command linguistically, but it conveys, of course, a prohibition. وَاجْتَنِبُوا قَوْلَ الزُّورِ, وَاجْتَنِبُوا, avoid. This is a command, but it delivers a prohibition. Avoid something, you are prohibited from it. And the juridical value points that are derived from these expressions also vary. One opinion is that a prohibition conveys tahrim, a total ban. Others say that it can be a total ban, or it may be a makruh or reprehensible, something conveys an abomination or karahiyya. Prohibition can convey guidance or irshad, like in Surah 5, verse 101, do not ask too many questions. That la tas'alu an ashya'in. It can convey reprimand, for example, don't do this, don't follow my orders and you will see. Sometimes prohibition can deliver supplication or dua. In Surah 2, verse 286, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا. O Allah, do not take us to task if we forget. Do not take us is a prohibition, but it delivers supplication. So which one of these is the primary meaning of a command, prohibition, and which is the secondary? Majority maintains that the primary is tahrim, that is a total ban, but these other abomination is a secondary meaning. Sometimes some say that prohibition is also in the nature of a homonym that combines different meanings. The literal meaning of a prohibition or of a command may be abandoned in favor of its metaphorical meaning, should there be indications that would suggest that course. Then I have another topic, the values of injunctions, how we evaluate. The prohibition, for example, when something is prohibited, it cannot give rise to any rights or any claim. Committing adultery is prohibited. It cannot give rise, for example, to the right of parenthood or to a lawful tie of kinship. Similarly, a sale of a dead carcass, because it is prohibited, it cannot transfer ownership. Sometimes a prohibition may not be related to the intrinsic nature of conduct, but due to an external circumstance, like fasting on the day of the Eid of Ramadan. Fasting is not prohibited, but it is void, batil on that occasion, according to the Shafi'i, in fasid, voidable according to the Hanafi. For example, according to the Hanafi, sale at the time of Friday prayer, it is 1 degree below batil, null and void. It is fasid. In other words, that sale actually does transfer ownership, but there is something wrong about it, and it should be dissolved at an early opportunity. But the Shafis do not recognize this distinction between void and voidable, batil and fasid. A question of immediate compliance or delayed compliance with regard to prohibition. For example, the majority maintain that prohibition is always requires continuous avoidance. This is the nature of prohibition. When you read in the Quran that do not squander the property of the orphans, and you must do that all the times, unless there is a conditional prohibition, then that may change the nature of the language. Then commands and prohibition may be explicit or they may be implicit. If they are explicit and are in no need of interpretation, then compliance with them partakes in the nature of ibadah for a believer. It is part of that a worship matter, a devotional aspect. Another question is, are we supposed to follow the commands and prohibition literally, or do we understand it in light of maslaha or hikmah and wisdom? For example, in the hadith, in every 40 sheep there is 1 sheep to be given in zakat. Are we to give this literally, or can we say that the monetary value of 1 is also acceptable? Here we do not apply it literally, but we accept a reasonable meaning. In the text, Fas'aw ila zikrillah, on the Friday prayer, abandon sale and rush to the remembrance of Allah. If you are literal about it, then you should run, but that is not the purpose. The purpose is to convey a certain emphasis. When it is a command or prohibition is implicit, it may be raised to the level of sarih or explicit if there is a hadith to support that meaning. Sometimes an expression in the Quran may occur by way of a praise or condemnation, and we cannot really attach any value to it. Like you read, God does not love the prodigals, la yuhibbul musrifin, in Surah 7 verse 31. What does it convey? We don't exactly know. The last question is whether the means to a command or a prohibition is also covered by the ruling that applies to the original command or prohibition. The general answer to that, yes, that the means to a command becomes wajib and the means to prohibition becomes haram. There is a legal maxim that if a wajib cannot be completed without doing something else, then that also becomes wajib. unless of course that something else is ruled by separate rules in the text, then our scenario is different. If the Quran requires consultation, then forming an assembly, or there is a parliament or a committee, that becomes part of the same objective. Finally, a mujtahid, alim of Sharia, must know the language of the Quran. A great deal of what we read in the injunctions of Quran and Sunnah are not explicit. The meaning has to be drawn from the through the light of indications in the general knowledge, and it's important to also have that, the general knowledge, and be well informed of the maqasid and objectives of Sharia. Thank you.